Now, former President Jacob Zuma is currently having his appeal being heard at the Pietermaritzburg High Court as he tries to rescind his 15-month prison sentence handed down by the Constitutional Court for contempt of court by not appearing at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. Now, earlier on, the ANC gave a press conference with Deputy Secretary General Jesse Duarte saying the rule of law will trump this weekend's events at Nkandla. As I mentioned, joining me to unpack this is Mr. William GUMEDE from Democracy Works and the WITS School of Governance. Mr. GUMEDE, good afternoon and thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon and thank you for having me.
Now, it's an absolute pleasure. Mr. GUMEDE, let's start off with what happened this weekend. I think, you know, we see ourselves currently gripped in a third wave. We see the amounts of people that have come in, and you just feel to yourself that this was the first sign of rule of law being broken right there.
You know, actually, and this has been consistent. I mean, Jacob Zuma in his attack against democratic institutions, against the judiciary before in this event really has shown us in the past, you know, that he prefers, that he is against the rule of law, or rather that he is above the Constitution and above the rule of law. Now, the Constitutional Court judgment actually makes it clear that no one is above the rule of the law, whether you're the president or whether you're Jacob Zuma. And clearly now what Jacob Zuma has now done, he and his allies have mobilized supporters in order to create almost an atmosphere of an uprising to try to show that he is so popular and that, you know, the courts must rescind the jail sentence. And again, they're so, you know, very consistent with Jacob Zuma that although we're under lockdown rules, we're not supposed to gather in the country. I mean, he does not care for those sort of niceties, for the law, for the rule of the law. It is all about him and about getting him out of jail.
We saw, Mr. GUMEDE, the MK-MBA forces, which are strongly in support of former President Zuma. And that in itself just shows that there's going to be a clear undermining, not just of the Constitution, but the rule of law of this country.
Absolutely, because that's already happening. I mean, just the fact that, former President Jacob Zuma has insisted that he's not going to jail, that is already undermining the rule of law. And yes, I mean, the Constitutional Court, I think we are all puzzled why the Constitutional Court gave him another opportunity to go to a lower court, you know, almost indulging him again, you know, in his very, very petulant behavior and in undermining, you know, the democratic institutions and so on. So again, I mean, this is consistent behavior from him. And I think it's going to be very important now that government, the police, and even the army should be used to bring law and order also among Jacob Zuma's supporters. I mean, the Constitutional Court has laid down the line, you know, by sentencing him to jail, has brought accountability back. Now, what we now need is, we need accountability now, the police to hold his supporters accountable and hold them accountable for illegally gathering and for, you know, making violent threats and for behaving illegally, I mean, against the law.
What we saw, and it was a clear sign earlier on of the sense of a rebellion, was that immediately he said, former President Jacob Zuma said, well, I'm not going to be attending the State Capture Commission of Inquiry because of the reason that he doesn't want to have the current Chief Justice right there. But that again, do you believe that it was a sense of audacity that he had within him to say, listen, yeah, I want to really break the rule of law? And that already just shows that when you have a leader who held in office for close to 10 years, it doesn't set a good precedence, does it, Mr. GUMEDE?
No, absolutely doesn't, yeah. So I think Jacob Zuma and his legal strategists appear to have, their strategy was that he should not go to the Zondo Commission because if he goes there, he will be implicated in more new multiple cases of corruption. So, you know, they strategized that it would be better that he takes the rap on a contempt of court, which gives you, you know, the 2 years maximum jail sentence. And he thought he could intimidate the courts, the constitutional courts, to only give him a slap on the wrist, to give him perhaps a suspended sentence, then he actually win on both counts. They sort of strategize. Then he doesn't have to go back to the commission, doesn't have to account for corruption, and he's free, suspended sentence, walks around. Now, it didn't go his way. And I think he was shocked and surprised that it didn't go his way, because in the last couple of years, he's been threatening violence, and everyone has been running around to accommodate him, fearful that he's going to cause chaos in the country, he's going to unleash violence in the country. And that has been his trump card. Even the ANC leadership up to now has been dancing around him. They've been accommodating him because they've been fearful that he will unleash violence in KwaZulu-Natal and possibly in the country. So Jacob Zuma thought that violent card will also work for the Constitutional Court. It hasn't.
But so, Gumede, you bring up an important point. Even the current leadership seems to be protecting him. And what was interesting earlier on when the Deputy Secretary General, Jesse Duarte, said, well, we want the rule of law to trump what had happened in Nkandla, but when you're hearing her tone, and I know she's been a strong ally of former President Zuma, it just seems that there is a sense that the ANC still wants to protect a man who really has gone against everything that the Constitution stands for.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's actually the sad part. That is, the ANC has showed no leadership during this really big moral and legal crisis in our country. I mean, even the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, has been totally absent. So there's a leadership vacuum currently in the country, and Jacob Zuma and his supporters are hogging the headlines. I mean, they're threatening violence, they're threatening instability. I mean, they are defying the laws of the country, and there has been no leadership from the ANC. There's been no clear statements rejecting what is happening. And that is a disappointing part of it. And sadly, again, it has been the judiciary that has offered the leadership by, of course, their judgment sending him by the Constitutional Court, sending him to jail. That is leadership. That's moral leadership. And that's the sort of leadership that the ANC should have shown already. The ANC should have long suspended Jacob Zuma from the ANC, or expelled him from the ANC for undermining our constitution and the democratic institutions.
Mr. Gumede, two words spring up to mind: sedition and rebellion. Would you say that these are two clear acts that the supporters of Zuma have shown during this past few hours, past few days?
No, I mean, they have contravened many laws. I mean, there's just the laws, of course, under our Disaster Management Act. They should be prosecuted. Now, if they are not prosecuted, what would it say for the rule of law? If you, any other ordinary citizen, whether you're in Cape Town or whether you're in Durban, if you contravene the curfew, will you be arrested? And then you can say, well, why am I going to be arrested? Why should I be arrested if the Jacob Zuma crowd and his supporters did not follow the law? So this is a really important instance here that that there has to be enforcement of the law. Otherwise, it's chaos. It's a total breakdown in law, and also the government will lose credibility, unable to enforce the lockdown. And we're in a serious crisis here. There's a third wave. It's a very serious third wave, and one way to deal with the spread of COVID-19 is for people to follow compliance.
One final question, Mr. Gumede. Have we as citizens allowed the former president to go scot-free?
Yes, I think sadly we have to accept, the people who initially voted for Jacob Zuma to become the ANC president. I mean, they should, they should be shameful of themselves. They should, at the time, remember, he was already then in a crowd of corruption. He was morally suspect, with the kind of allegations around him, his personal behavior, and his violent behavior, even before he was elected as ANC president. Just the idea that South Africans can vote for a man like that, who cares only for himself, doesn't care for the country, doesn't care, for the constitution, doesn't care for ordinary people, even doesn't care for his own voters, and so on. I think, really that's an indictment for the future, future generations. They will look back and they will wonder, were we all mad in South Africa to have voted for a person like Jacob Zuma?
William Gumede, thank you so much for making the time for us. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. William GUMEDE, the part of WITS School of Governance and Democracy Works, just sharing us his insight on currently what happened this weekend and what is happening now with regards to the Constitutional Court ruling and the former president trying to rescind it and trying to avoid the 15-month jail time. Well, coming up after the break, we'll be shifting our focus to international news. Do stay tuned.